In this short video, we're going to define what a radian is, and then we're going to look at how to convert between radians and degrees. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring in this applet, because I think it illustrates really well what a radian is, and I will link this applet in the show notes. And so what a radian is, it's a unit of measurement such that the angle is the same as the measure of the radius on the circumference of the circle. Notice, if my radius is this long, then 1 radian is an angle measure, is the same as that radius's length along an arc of the circle. And so that's what 1 radian would look like. That's what 2 radians would look like. That's what 3 radians would look like. Oh, excuse me. And you can see that 3 radians is almost halfway around the circle. And you might predict, okay, well, it's 3 point something to get halfway around the circle. And if you're thinking it would be pi or 3.14, you would be right. Now, this little program rounds it to 3.15, but basically halfway around the circle is pi radians. So there's 3.14, and then 4 radians would look like that. 5 radians would look like that. 6 radians would look like that. And therefore 6.28, or in other words 2 pi radians, gets you all the way around the circle. So let's now just kind of define that and start to look at it. So our formal definition of a radian, it's a unit of angle equal to an angle at the center of a circle whose arc is equal in length to the radius. So the formal definition is kind of a mouthful, but you need to recognize that if this is a radian, then this length right here is equal to the radius of the circle. And 1 revolution all the way around the circle, which would be 360 degrees, is 2 pi radians. And this next part's really important because we're going to use this on our next slide when we make our conversions. A half revolution, halfway around the circle, we know that's 180 degrees, but 180 degrees is equal to pi radians. So kind of store those in your memory banks as we look at how to make conversions. So we're going to first start by converting radians to degrees, okay? And so what I'm going to do to convert radians to degrees, if I start with 15 pi over 4 radians, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by 180 degrees over pi radians. And there's a few different ways you could think about this to kind of help it make sense. But I think about it is since 180 degrees is equal to pi radians, this is kind of like multiplying by 1. You're multiplying by something over itself, but we're just changing the units because radians over radians cancels. And then we're just going to, and then your pi's are going to cancel because pi over pi cancels. And then we're just multiplying straight across. And when you multiply straight across, 15 times 180 is 2,700. And 2,700 over 4 is going to give you 675 degrees. So that's how we convert 15 pi over 4 radians to degrees. So we can do our second example. If you want, you may want to pause the video and see if you can do it on your own. But basically, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to multiply by 180 degrees over pi radians. And we do that because it's like multiplying by a form of 1. It's not going to change the value of our measure over here. But radians over radians, those units will cancel, and pi over pi cancels. So whenever I multiply straight across, it's going to be negative 180 over 18. And whenever I do 180 over 18, that's going to simplify to 10 degrees. Now our summary, your big takeaway from this slide is to convert from radians to degrees, you will multiply by 180 degrees over pi radians. Okay, so write that in your notes, store that in your memory banks. That's how we convert from radians to degrees. Now, let's convert from degrees to radians. Let's go the other way. And so you might be predicting what we're going to do here. So we're still going to multiply by that form of 1, but now I want the degrees to cancel out. So I'm going to multiply by pi radians over 180 degrees. And so when I multiply straight across, the degrees are going to cancel, and you end up with 216 pi over 180. That is actually going to simplify to 6 pi over 5 radians. And if you stay tuned, I'll show you a little trick for how to do this simplification in your calculator on the next slide. But let's do one more. So I'm going to convert negative 18 degrees, and so I'm going to do that by multiplying by pi radians over 180 degrees, and the degree units cancel, and we multiply straight across to get negative 18 pi over 180, and then whenever I simplify that, that's going to be negative pi over 10 radians. And so we've got the same rule here. To convert from degrees to radians, we're now going to multiply by the reciprocal. We're going to multiply by pi radians over 180 degrees. So it's just like the other conversion that we're making. We've just taken the reciprocal. Now, lastly, what we're going to do is I want to show you, if you know how to get from here to here, then you should stop watching this video. But if you're struggling with how I'm getting from here to here so easily, I want to show you kind of a calculator trick for doing that. Okay, so when converting from degrees to radians, we multiply by pi over 180, then we multiply straight across and get this value right here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do 216 divided by 180. I'm not going to put the pi in there, and then I'm going to hit math, enter, enter. And if you have one of these TI calculators that are really common in education, it's going to put your fraction in simplest form. So it's going to be 6 pi over 5. Remember, we didn't multiply the pi in here, so on your final answer, you'd have to put a pi next to it. 6 pi over 5, or 6/5 pi. Then for the next one, we get negative 18 over 180. And then once again, math is this button right here, and then enter, enter, and it's going to convert that to negative 1/10, or negative pi over 10. So as I showed with the calculator a second ago, this one would be 6 pi over 5 would be your final answer. That fraction in the calculator simplified to that right there, but then you just put a pi onto it. And then we want to get in the habit of labeling our answer with radians. And this one is negative pi over 10 radians.